I never used to be a fan of Metroidvania games. I always found myself losing interest after the first few hours, and would frequently get lost in their expansive worlds. I always liked the idea of the genre, but figured it just wasn't for me. However, that changed in 2018 when I first played Ori and the Blind Forest, and instantly fell in love. I was first exposed to this game around its initial release when I watched the start of a playthrough for the game, and thought it was pretty cool. After now completing 3 playthroughs, I can confirm that my interest was well placed. My playthrough for this review was 100% completion on hard difficulty, which was my second playthrough after the first one in 2018 on normal. I also completed a third run on easy difficulty to earn the 3-hour speedrun and no ability points spent achievements. For anyone curious, my final time was 2:33:53. I also only own the definitive edition, therefore it's what I played for the video. I'll discuss any major changes made in this re-release later. The focus of this video is discussing my thoughts on every aspect of Ori, including the gameplay, abilities, story, and the progression of the game and its big moments. Therefore, the entire game will be spoiled, and this is your warning to come back to this video after you've played the game for yourself. However, I will say that you should absolutely play it, and if you like platformers and enjoy games with a lot of passion imbued into them, then you'll love Ori. The story is simple yet moving, the gameplay is very smooth, and the music is incredible. The 100% completion journey also isn't too difficult, and shouldn't require looking up any guides online. Easily doable within 10 hours. And with that, let's begin. It's time to dive into Ori and the Blind Forest. The hand-drawn art style of Ori and the Blind Forest are some of the best visuals I have ever seen in a video game. Everywhere you go, there is always something visually stimulating to look at. I can't imagine how much time Moon Studios spent solely on creating the world of Nibel, but it's evident that they did something very right. Nibel is a massive world with plenty of environments to visit, including forests, swamps, large valleys, the inside of a giant tree, frozen ruins, and a volcano. Colors pop, and you're never a few steps away from the next set of mind-blowing visuals. If there's anything that I can critique about how the game looks, it would have to be how certain hazards are integrated into the environment. Everything looks so seamless that sometimes spikes and enemies can blend right into the foreground and background. It happened more often than I'd like to admit that I died from hazards that I either couldn't see or didn't think would damage me. Accompanying the stellar visuals is an excellent soundtrack to really bring the game to life. The main theme perfectly captures the tone of the game. A broken and desolate world that is slowly regaining hope in the form of Ori cleansing it. As soon as you reach the title screen, you can tell that this game is something special. The main theme of the game is incredible, and it's up there with one of my favorite title themes, along with others like Doom Eternal and Fallout 4. Every main area of the game has its own theme, and although they sounded great while playing and complemented the feel of each area, none of them really stuck in my mind. That's not to say they were bad, far from it. I could easily throw on the soundtrack in the background while working on assignments for school. I think I personally enjoy songs that have a lot of energy to them, which could explain why the one song that does stand out among the others is the Jinso Tree escape music. So much energy, so much excitement, all bundled together in the best part of the game. And I'll have much more to say about this section in the gameplay discussion of the video, but first we gotta talk about the story. The opening of this game has 0 character dialogue, only the narration of the spirit tree in a booming voice. Ori is one of the forest spirits of the tree, lost after a storm, and is found by the kind Nehru. Nehru becomes a mother to Ori and takes care of them, and they're shown having a very peaceful life. You actually get to play short sections of this in the prologue, like moving Nehru towards a tree to shake down berries growing on it. Years later, when the spirit tree tries to call out to Ori to return to their true home, Nehru grabs Ori to protect them from the strong energy being radiated by the tree. Unknown to our characters, the strength of the spirit tree was damaged by an evil presence, causing the forest to die and wither away. All of the happiness experienced by Nehru and Ori is taken away and they're left to die. There's a heartbreaking scene where Nehru tries to climb a tree for fruit, but falls from a broken branch. Nehru even dies in the prologue, and this shit broke my heart on the first playthrough, seeing Ori cling on to the only person they had to care for. With no reason to stay, Ori leaves home and finds a helping hand in their adventure, a spirit named Sign. Together they make their way to the spirit tree with the hopes of repairing their once beautiful world. After reaching the large tree, the main goal of the game is established: collect the water, wind, and warmth elements to save Nibel. These are scattered across the world in the Jinso Tree, the Forlorn Ruins, and Mount Horu. They meet a friendly Gumon creature named Gumon, who steals the key to the Jinso Tree to stop Ori from entering it, but later returns the key following an act of kindness. Ori reaches the Jinso Tree and purchases it of the infection present to retrieve the element of water and purify all of Nibel's water. However, this doesn't happen without a close encounter with Kuro, who's actively trying to prevent Ori from achieving their goal for reasons currently unknown. With Nibel's water restored, Ori now travels to the Misty Woods to retrieve the Gumon seal to unlock the Forlorn Ruins. This place is the home of the once thriving Gumons, now frozen over due to the dying forest. Gumon is the last remaining member of his race, and you see a somber moment where he's grieving the loss of his kind. Ori makes their way through the ruins and reaches the element of wind. Gumon takes an item called a light vessel, which causes the ruins to collapse and force Ori to escape. This sequence ends with Ori stumbling upon Kuro's nest, where a lone egg remains in the empty cave. At this point, Kuro's motives become clear through a flashback from her perspective. The outburst of energy due to the spirit tree calling it to Ori was so strong that it killed 3 of her children while Kuro was away scavenging for food. This scene shattered my soul when I first saw it, and I just slumped down in my chair in sadness. Thinking about how the start of my adventure came at the cost of Kuro losing her children made me feel bad about what I had done. She just wanted to protect her kids, and I took that from her. Damn, this game hurts, man. After being pursued by Kuro and sneaking away, Ori and Sign continue through Sorrow's Pass to retrieve the Sunstone, and then make the final leg of the journey over to Mount Horu. The active volcano is home to the element of warmth, the last element needed to repair the forest. We also see Gumon become more than just a weird spider dude when he takes the light vessel to resurrect Neru. He couldn't save his own family, but at least he could save another. Neru and Gumon are shown traveling to Mount Horu to reunite with Ori. After exploring the volcano, Ori and Sign find the element of warmth, where they're ambushed one last time by Kuro and make their escape. The final cutscene shows Kuro seeing Neru reuniting with Ori and reflecting on her own past mistakes. She's gone out of her way to destroy the lives of others as a result of grief. She sees all of the destruction she's caused in the aftermath of the volcanic eruption, becoming so selfish and wanting to kill Ori that it's almost too late when she notices her own nest beginning to ignite with fire. The only way to prevent this is to restore the final element of the spirit tree and save Nibel, causing heavy rain to extinguish the flames. Kuro sacrifices herself to save everyone else, and it's both depressing and heartwarming to see it all come together. The game ends with Ori, Neru, and Gumon happily living together, but not without a surprise: Kuro's last egg left in their care. Not only an ending that leaves you feeling satisfied, but also opens the door for a sequel that we thankfully got in 2020. And all of this is told without a single word of dialogue, other than narration from the spirit tree. The story of Ori and the Blind Forest may not be the most complex narrative in a video game, but it's a damn effective one. Even on my most recent playthrough for this review, I found myself tearing up during several scenes, and it just goes to show how well the story is presented here. Now it's time for the gameplay discussion. The movement in this game feels very smooth, and you can tell that Moon Studios put an unholy amount of time perfecting how Ori controls. Considering that most of the game is a test of very precise platforming and well-timed ability usage, it's a relief that this aspect was given the time it needed. On the other hand, the intense focus on platforming resulted in a bare-bones combat system that isn't a deal-breaker for me, but is something that I could see others having an issue with. Combat in Ori is spamming one button to perform short-range spirit flame attacks that home onto the nearest enemy. The reason I don't particularly have an issue with it is because engaging an enemy promotes movement and environmental awareness to get into the best position for safely dealing damage. You're never standing in just one place spamming a button, and the game does its best to keep you moving as much as possible. Given that Ori is a Metroidvania-like game with ability-based progression, it's expected that you'll be doing a lot of secret hunting to find collectibles and additional upgrades. This is certainly true, and is what you'll be spending most of your time looking for during a 100% playthrough. There aren't any side quests in the game, so unlocking all abilities and reaching health and energy caps are the completion goal. This decision eliminates the unnecessary filler that exists in many games nowadays, as the average 100% playthrough shouldn't take much longer than 8 to 9 hours if you're experienced with the game, but of course this can vary for every person. The short length can also have an unfortunate side effect of making me want more from the game, as I felt like I just reached the highest tier of upgrades with no reason to have them. Thankfully, this feeling of wanting more is remedied by the sequel, Ori and the Will of the Wisps, but it still felt shorter than I wanted. I think a final platforming gauntlet that tied everything together could have been really exciting to play, something like the Path of Pain from Hollow Knight. Mount Horu got close to this, but it also felt like testing individual elements of your skill set a few at a time rather than an all-encompassing final exam. It basically covers my thoughts for the in-game 100% completion, other than discussing skill point grinding, but I'll talk about that later. Also note that I started the last paragraph with Ori as a Metroidvania-like game, as it has elements of the genre, but doesn't feel like a full commitment to it. Ori is a mostly linear game, with the only types of non-linearity coming from the optional item collection between story sequences, or after acquiring a new ability. The structure feels more like a Zelda game rather than something like Hollow Knight. My idea of a Metroidvania game is starting at one point in a large sprawling map and moving outwards from that point in all direction, with your experience varying on each playthrough based on the order of areas you explore and when you obtain a new ability. There isn't much of that in Ori. The game clearly tells you where to go next, and builds each challenge around having specific abilities by that point. I still love this game without it being a Metroidvania in all aspects, I just think it's important to make that distinction. Ori also has an unconventional save system, where you create your own save points by consuming one of your energy cells. There are also spirit wells around the world to act as fast travel points for each area of interest for creating save points and spending your ability points. Since these wells are spread out, it's likely that most of your saving will be done by spending energy cells. Therefore, saving is directly connected to your resources, which is both an interesting concept and a major pain in the ass. On one hand, you're responsible for managing your energy cells and saving your game to add another layer to the gameplay. But on the other hand, long stretches of gameplay without crystals to refill your energy cells can be unbelievably punishing. Needing to repeat a section several times because of a lack of crystals to restore your energy usage can be very frustrating. This gets even more annoying when your save point is right before an unskippable cutscene, which must be rewatched after every death if you don't make another save point after it finishes. If you're not very good at this game and have a habit of making a lot of save points, then you'll get to experience these cutscenes over and over again. And they could be something as simple as hitting a lever to watch a doorway open, or reaching a certain part in a level and the camera pans over to another thing happening off screen, like Gumon moving around. Although this system is genuinely unique for this game, annoyances like these immediately make me dislike its inclusion, and can even ruin the game a bit, especially on hard difficulty. Speaking of which, hard difficulty on Ori felt like a totally different game compared to normal mode. Enemies get super tanky, and you start to notice really fast when you don't have many energy or life cell upgrades. You'll definitely want to be dumping most of your skill points into the combat tree, or some enemy encounters are going to take a long time. There are several enemy types and environmental hazards that can easily kill you in 1 or 2 hits, maybe 3 with maximum life cells. The issue of environmental hazards blending in with the world is further amplified when I get one-shot by things I can't even see. Additionally, in areas with fewer life cells available, it's possible to go long stretches of gameplay while being killed in just 1 hit. It started to get the most frustrating when I was frequently low on resources despite thinking I was playing quite conservatively with consuming energy cells. I don't think it helped that this hard mode playthrough was being played entirely with a left stick drift, which I was too stubborn to resolve before playing. But even with a perfectly functioning controller, these issues are still present. There are also 3 skill trees to upgrade different aspects of Ori's gameplay. I'm unsure if these trees have official names, so I'm just going off of what they're called on the Ori wiki page. These trees include combat, efficiency, and utility. A combat tree strengthens abilities such as Stomp, Spirit Flame, and Charge Flame. These upgrades are typically damage increases, range increases, and the number of targets that can be simultaneously hit in the case of the regular Spirit Flame attack. The efficiency tree is meant to improve exploration and resource capabilities, such as marking health and energy cell upgrades on the map and increasing experience gain. The utility tree has skills specifically for keeping yourself alive and adding conveniences to current abilities, like being able to rekindle save points to save multiple times in a single flame, and regaining health when creating a new save point. Hell, there's even abilities at the end of this tree that give double defense and a triple jump, which is insane. I think this system works well with the game as a whole, and the freedom to prioritize certain trees more than others is nice for additional playthroughs. It's easy to understand and helps to provide a bit more depth to the gameplay just beyond platforming. For most people, I think the utility tree will be the best option to prioritize allotting ability points into, though each tree has its own set of helpful upgrades. My only issue with the skill tree system is that there's little reason to even grind out the ability points for unlocking all skills. By the time I usually complete the game, I only have a few skills remaining to unlock, but by that point I'm already done. This criticism ties into the point I made earlier about the lack of a final endgame test, where it feels like I'm just unlocking skills for the sake of seeing 100% on my profile. While I still enjoy finding all the secrets in the game, I do wish that there was just a little more. When specifically grinding the currency to unlock every skill in the game, which is something you'll need to do especially on hard difficulty, it can become quite uninteresting. It's not difficult to do, just tedious, all for a number on the file select screen. I didn't mind doing it on my first playthrough since I just wanted the achievements for unlocking every skill, but I didn't even bother on my recent hard playthrough since most skills are actually more expensive to purchase on the higher difficulty, and this requires significantly more grinding to unlock. The game progression follows a pretty simple formula. After completing the prologue, you enter a cycle of exploring an area to find an item to access another area with one of the 3 elements required to save the forest. I plan on discussing every section of the game, but naturally I'll have much more to say about some parts more than others. I'll be sure to talk about every main ability unlocked though, as those are essential to Ori's gameplay formula. But first, the prologue itself. After watching the heartbreaking introduction to the game, your journey begins in the Sunken Glades. You walk towards the left and eventually stumble upon Sign, a spirit from the Spirit Tree. Sign acts as a companion for your adventure, as well as the first main ability you earn, Spirit Flame. This is the basic flame attack that serves as your main form of offense. After fighting some basic jumping enemies, you'll eventually reach the next main ability, a wall jump. This is the first game that I can recall playing that had an infinite wall jump, and it was really cool to see just how much more freedom it provided to the player. Not only can you use it to jump between 2 adjacent walls, but you can jump up one single wall with repeated button presses. This area also introduces 2 new mechanics for progression. The keystones always comes in pairs of 2 or more, or maybe only in sets of 4, I don't really remember. They're typically scattered around an area and block off a pathway until all are collected. You'll see these pop up frequently throughout the game, and it's a smart way of funneling players into exploring an entire section of the map. The other mechanic are the mapstone fragments, which are items that must be collected and delivered to their respective pedestals to uncover the map of a region, including most hidden areas. Neither of these systems are necessarily new or innovative, but I guess if it ain't broke, don't fix it. After jumping around lasers and pushing blocks to create safe pathways, you'll reach the Spirit Tree, and then you're off to the Jinso Tree. To the east of the Spirit Tree is the Hollow Grove, where the third main ability is found, Charge Flame. By consuming an energy cell, you perform an AoE attack with a short radius to damage nearby enemies or break certain cracked objects and plants. I avoided using this attack unless absolutely necessary, as the trade-off with losing energy is not at all worth it to me. The damage it deals is decent, but I'd rather just keep spamming my regular attack than consuming precious resources. Moving through this area leads to Thornfelt Swamp, home to the Jinso Tree. As you arrive at the tree, Gumon is seen stealing the water vein item, so you follow him through the swamp. Eventually you'll reach a bridge that Gumon collapses as you're walking across it, dropping you into his hideout that you'll need to climb out of. Dropping into this area does not give you a save point, so if you're out of energy when you fall and end up dying, have fun rewatching the cutscene of Gumon dropping the bridge several times. You do some keystone collection around crushers and puke spitting enemies, eventually making it to ability number 4, Double Jump. I haven't played this game in a few years, so after playing Hollow Knight this past summer, I was shocked by how early you got the double jump ability. I actually like having it this early, since the game can start building its complex platforming challenges with your ever-growing moveset sooner than later. Ori's double jump is very floaty and always travels a set distance, which I think works well in this game. This is different from other games, where your double jump height, much like the original jump, is dependent on the length of your button press. No complaints from me here. Using the newly acquired ability, you work your way out of Gumon's hideout, eventually meeting him at the top and retrieving the water vein item. The path to the top is pretty standard platforming that now incorporates the double jump for jumping across large gaps and climbing around spiked sections of walls. This is where the movement really starts to build into something special, but it's not quite yet there. We'll discuss that shortly. With the water vein item brought back, it's time for the first major section of the game, climbing the Jinso Tree to retrieve the element of water. The tree is a large vertical structure that uses portals to warp you around the area. These portals are also incorporated into puzzles that involve moving objects and projectiles between portals, as well as finding the correct one that leads to progression through the tree. It's possibly my favorite section of the game, and also where you get my favorite ability in the game, Bash. It's not an understatement for me to say that this single ability changed this game from being just another 2D platformer to a game with one of the best movement systems I've ever played. Bash allows you to propel yourself off of an enemy while launching them in the opposite direction. Not only does this apply to enemies, but also their projectiles and other items in the world like lanterns. Both platforming and combat are significantly enhanced by this ability's inclusion, as a group of enemies with many projectiles now becomes its own minigame of keeping yourself in the air for as long as possible. You're no longer limited to the ground in a combat arena, and realizing just how much potential this ability adds to the game is an amazing moment on your first playthrough. It's one of the first things I always think of with Ori and the Blind Forest, and it gets me excited just thinking about it. Reaching the top of the tree and destroying the blight will begin the best part of the game, the Jinso Tree escape. You'll have to move so fast and make quick decisions to make it through the destruction in one attempt. There are no checkpoints during this section, so death means repeating the sequence. It's only around 2 minutes long and not too difficult once you learn it, but I can confidently say that this portion of Ori is a perfect 10 out of 10. I have nothing but praise to give to it. It combines amazing music, smooth controls, fun abilities, and stellar visuals to produce one of my favorite moments in video games from recent years. Completing this section and claiming the water element is about 1/3 through the game. Cleansing the Jinso Tree immediately affects the world, causing all poisonous water in the region to become clean, unlocking Ori's ability to swim. You wake up near a lake to provide a basic introduction to swimming, although it's not nearly as significant to the game as you might initially expect. This is one of the very few times you'll actually be swimming in Ori, with the other sections usually delegated to secret areas previously inaccessible due to the poisonous water. I frequently forgot that swimming is even in the game because it's used so little. Regardless, it still controls great as expected, and you swim through different spikes, enemies, and crushers as you retrieve keystones to progress. You're next told to travel through the Valley of the Wind to the Misty Woods on the other side of the map, but not without visiting the right side of the map first. Here you'll find the next main ability, Stomp. This is a ground pad activated with a directional input downwards while in the air. Personally, I'd much prefer having a dedicated button for stomping so I don't accidentally trigger while moving around obstacles or fighting enemies, but I guess it works fine with how it's currently implemented. Playing with stick drift definitely did not help this issue, though it's my fault for not using a different controller. However, I will say that Stomp does a surprising amount of damage to enemies and has a large area of effect, making it a very strong ability in combat. As long as you have the time to execute Stomp, it's a safe option for hitting several enemies around you, even ones on walls or ceilings. To unlock the Forlorn Ruins, first we'll need to find the Gumon seal hidden in the Misty Woods. You travel to the west where you have an interaction with Kuro in which she kills you if you follow the main path. Instead, you take a path upwards to get above and drop a rock on top of her, causing her to flee. She doesn't depart without leaving behind a feather on the ground, which Ori smartly picks up and uses as a glider for the next main ability of the game. It's a simple upgrade to the moveset that gets a lot of mileage in later sections, as you follow wind currents and traverse larger than average size gaps. Glide is an excellent ability and feels like a natural expansion of Ori's moveset. You save at a fast travel well and cross a large valley to the entrance of the Misty Woods. I'm very mixed on this section of the game, because despite being aesthetically pleasing, it can be a bit annoying at times. The environment is warped and shifts around to simulate the spookiness of the woods, which brings the issue of hazards blending into the scenery to the forefront. Sometimes you can't see obstacles from the screen warping, and it interferes with what should be a pretty cool section of the game. This, combined with a lack of energy and life crystals, will make you die a lot here. It certainly escalated my death count during my hard mode playthrough. The area itself is described in-game as a place where everyone gets lost due to the misty psychedelics, but it's just a glorified linear pathway with a keystone hunt. While it's not inherently bad, I'm accusing the game of setting mixed signals, but I might have just been reading into the narration too much. You also get one of the lamest abilities in the game here, with Climb. Rather than just wall jumping up a steep wall, you can now climb it without any additional jump inputs. Whoa! This adds nothing to the game for me. The only area of the game that actually tries to make use of this ability is the Misty Woods, when you're playing Follow the Leader with blue plants creating a path. After reaching the end, you find an orb to carry a short distance back to the entrance of the woods, unlocking the Gumon seal. Thank God it's over. The Misty Woods isn't really that bad, but considering the high quality of the rest of the game, it sticks out on my mind like an anti-masker at the grocery store. The second major section of the game is exploring the frozen over forlorn ruins to recover the wind element. The main mechanic of this area involves carrying around a light vessel that temporarily melts the ice covering an item and powers nearby platforms. It also acts as a magnet to allow for walking on certain walls and ceilings, which is a really neat mechanic. This can be used when standing on blocks suspended in the air to change Ori's direction of falling to reach a new path. Unfortunately, lugging this vessel around can be a bit slow at times, as it's required to go anywhere in the ruins, at least until you permanently place it in its pedestal. There's also a severe lack of energy crystals throughout this area, so if you're low on energy, then I hope you love redoing the same section over and over and over again, because I absolutely hate it. After reaching the element of winds deep in the forlorn ruins, Gumon removes the light vessel from its pedestal, causing the ruins to collapse and beginning another escape sequence like in the Jinso tree. This section makes a good use of the glide ability to avoid falling debris while riding wind currents. While it's still another fun movement test, it feels like it requires much more trial and error compared to the quick reaction time of the Jinso tree. The falling objects are much less predictable and expect you to be in a certain place to dodge them, like this large rock. It's only avoidable if you're against the right wall and above it, which isn't initially clear until you see how it falls. A new rendition of the Jinso tree escape music also plays during this section, now incorporating more wind instruments to fit nicely with the restoration of the wind element vibe, and as expected it sounds great. Overall, still a good section of the game, as with all of Ori and the Blind Forest, but guessing correctly will never be as enjoyable as reacting smartly. After escaping the ruins, you're hit with an unexpected stealth section while being hunted by Kuro. I use this term stealth very loosely though, since it amounts to no more than running from one piece of cover to the next, but I don't know any other terms that aptly describe this. It's a test of planning a route and executing it quickly enough to not be killed by Kuro, which happens if you're exposed out in the open for long enough, maybe around 10 seconds. It's a pretty cool part that shows up when you least expect it, and shakes up things nicely after another major section of the game with the ruins. After successfully escaping Kuro, you set off to Soro's Pass to retrieve the Sunstone. This is approximately 2/3 through the game. With the winds restored to the forest, you can follow an updraft through the large valley near the Misty Woods entrance to reach Soro's Pass, beginning the upward climb of quality. The game also follows up the lamest ability with one of the best, Charge Jump. By holding the left trigger, you can charge up Ori such that the next jump you perform will have significantly greater acceleration and maximum height. It can also be utilized when you're holding yourself in place on a wall to launch away from it at any angle within the approximate 90-degree cone. This is the only time the game actually makes good use of the previously mentioned dreadful climb ability, since you can hold yourself in place on a vertical surface more easily. I'm actually not sure if the wall launch would even work without climb with how it's currently coded, but it's something they certainly could have embedded into Charge Jump to make climb even more useless than it already is. Soro's Pass is broken up into 3 main sections, and you progress through each one by collecting keystones and breaking sections of the floor to extend the path of the wind currents. Now that the winds have been restored to the world, the game can finally make good use of the glide ability, and you bet it does. This, combined with using the charge jump, makes this one of my favorite sections of the game. Even though the game is still reusing the keystone concept, they're basically just an excuse to explore every part of an area now, which is something I do regardless of the main objective, so I typically collect them all by accident. Progression feels the same as exploring an area, and for this game in particular, it works wonderfully. After clearing these 3 sections and reaching the top of the map, you get a stellar view of the world, with Mount Horu looming ominously in the distance, and retrieve the Sunstone. The last major section of Ori and the Blind Forest is navigating Mount Horu to find the fire element. The goal of Mount Horu is to drain the lava from the bottom area of the volcano, where the path to the element resides, by blocking the flow of lava from the left and right sides of the volcano. Both sides are split up into a series of brief challenge rooms that are completed from the top of the volcano to the bottom. Given that this area is the end of the game, it's expected that it'll test everything you've learned throughout your playthrough, and I'd say it does a pretty great job of that. Enemies hurt a lot, and certain sections of the floor will inflict damage if you remain stationary for too long, so you'll always be on the move. It truly feels like a final test and ties the whole experience together. There's one room in particular that sticks out in my mind as being really fun. You have to defeat every enemy in the room to block the lava flow. However, these enemies can only be hurt by their own projectiles, which must be bashed back towards them. Juggling projectiles while being shot at by 5+ enemies is super fun, as any mistake will send you into spikes that are potentially one-shotting you on hard difficulty. After completing all challenge rooms, a path to the base of the volcano opens to where the element of warmth awaits. However, you're ambushed by Kuro one last time for the final section of the game. This is a combination of the escape sequences from the Jinzo Tree and Forlorn Ruins, as well as the stealth section following the latter. You have to move fast through each segment to avoid being caught by Kuro. Meanwhile, each one is covered in enemies and falling debris from the volcanic eruption. Thankfully, it doesn't feel nearly as trial and error as the last escape, due to objects falling much more predictably. However, the layout of each part is more than just a straight path through a structure, so you'll spend more time learning where to go instead of where to position yourself to avoid debris, which is an interesting change-up between other similar sections. It makes good use of the glide, bash, and charge jump abilities, although as I've mentioned before, I think there's still more that could be done to really push the movement system to the extreme. After reaching the end of this section, you witness the final cutscene of the game and watch the credits roll. Overall, a really fun part of the game that concludes with a heartbreaking, yet hopeful resolution to the central conflict. You may think that this is the end of the game progression discussion, but there's still more to talk about, specifically the new areas added in the Definitive Edition. These include the Blackroot Burrows and the Lost Grove. There were also some quality of life improvements in this new version, including fast travel between save wells and various bug fixes. I'm surprised that fast travel wasn't in the original release, but despite being convenient and nice to have, I don't think the game experience would be significantly impacted without its inclusion. The Blackroot Burrows can be accessed very early in the game, and there's nothing stopping you from completing the area the first time you arrive there. Its main gimmick is the absence of light, besides for the occasional bioluminescence highlighting enemies and platforms. It's very visually interesting, and I think works well as add-on content rather than being a main section of the game. Further into the area are ethereal looking platforms that initially aren't very special, but later add a twist on the orb carrying mechanic from previous sections. When carrying the orb of light, these objects will disappear and reappear within its radius. This light can also be used to ignite torches when you walk over them, creating puzzles where a wall or stone blocking a path will only be moved once all torches are lit. It's similar to the Keystone system, but distinct in a good way that makes platforming feel different from the rest of the game. This area ends with unlocking one of the new optional abilities. It's a pretty self-explanatory ability, where clicking right bumper propels Ori forward in whichever direction they're facing. There's a very short cooldown when using dash, maybe only a couple of frames after touching the ground, making it a versatile tool for moving around quickly. And oh boy, can you zoom with it! Once you get this ability, it'll completely change the way you play the game, and it's something that I may go for early on future playthroughs just to use for the rest of the game. There's also an upgrade in the utility skill tree that allows you to dash mid-air, which is actually nuts. It's clear that most of the game wasn't initially built for Ori to be moving this fast, as dashing too quickly between different areas can sometimes trigger what is usually an invisible loading screen, where the game appears to soft lock temporarily as it waits for the loading to catch up. It's pretty funny to see this happen the first few times, but after a while it can become quite annoying. Perhaps this feature could have been more thoroughly tested by the developers, but I can't say it ever negatively affected my game experience. The second bonus area is the Lost Grove, a place that was once the home of Neru and her family. Exploration of this area is complemented with additional cutscenes and story bits to develop Neru's past. You learn about Neru's childhood growing up with her father and the friends she made with two forest spirits like Ori. Her father rejects this relationship due to not wanting to associate with creatures of light. A later vision shows their peaceful lives together, with Neru slowly getting older with each new vision. The last one, however, ends with Neru leaving her home forever after witnessing the passing of her father. It's certainly a sad backstory and closely mirrors the beginning of Ori's life with Neru, which is obviously very intentional on the part of the developers, but it doesn't hit quite as hard when you realize this point. I'm glad the new Definitive Edition content expanded the story of the supporting characters, but I actually had to re-watch my recordings to even remember what happened here. The new gameplay segments are great, but the story didn't pack as much of a punch as I might have expected from the main narrative. The new ability added in the Lost Grove is the Light Burst, a throwable projectile that can be used for both combat and puzzle solving. Hitting an enemy with a projectile will deal a decent amount of damage, but its more interesting application consists of launching the light ball into narrow, inaccessible passageways to light torches for unlocking new paths. The Lost Grove area builds puzzles around finding the best angle to throw the light burst to hit all targets in a single use, as well as using pieces of the environment like bounce pads to determine a more creative path. It's actually used in the same way as carrying around special torches in the Blackroot Burrows to light objects, and attaching it to something that doesn't enforce movement restrictions is an S-tier decision. Each one you throw also consumes half of an energy cell, so they need to be used wisely. I enjoy the way that the game makes use of this ability, and the added bonus of being able to bash off of the projectiles is really cool. Being able to alley-oop yourself for extra height is really satisfying. Another thing that's amazing in the Lost Grove is the visual presentation. I've already sung my praises about how Ori and the Blind Forest looks, but oh my god, the Lost Grove is a strong contender for the prettiest area in the game. The aquatic plant life, the bright blue skies hovering over certain stretches of beaches, the various small details around Neru's former home, it's truly a sight to behold. And with that, my thoughts on the Definitive Edition content are finally done. Let's end this video now, shall we? What a smooth transition. I am amazed that Moon Studios was able to put together such a well-made game as their first project. They've proven themselves to be a company capable of producing some of the most artistically beautiful games in the industry, as well as creating a fluid gameplay experience with a story that pulls on your heartstrings. I didn't expect to love Ori that much upon playing the game for the first time, but here I am talking about it for over 30 minutes in my longest review video to date. The story is simple, with themes of sacrifice and remaining hopeful in even the darkest times, but it's still one that sticks into my mind for its effectiveness. The way Ori moves just feels perfect, and the game applies the steadiest stream of new abilities and upgrades to naturally evolve the game. Although not all of these upgrades were revolutionary, with some being either insignificant or disappointing, cough cough, the few that did stand out like Bash and Charge Jump really pulled everything together for me. The game is also paced fairly well despite the middle slog through the misty woods and parts of the Forlorn Ruins, but regardless it never stopped me from another playthrough. The ending stretch through Mount Hori was a satisfying send-off, but there could have been a bit more oomph to really push Ori's moveset to the extreme. My thoughts on Ori and the Will of the Wisps are even more overwhelmingly positive, but you'll have to wait a while before that video comes out. I've got some other games to play, with work on the 6th video game review already underway. But for now, thank you for sticking around this long to see the video to the end. Even though this game isn't extremely long, I have a lot of passion for the Ori series, and therefore had a lot to say about this first game. I hope you have a great day, and as always, feel free to leave suggestions for future reviews in the comments. Thank you for watching. The efficiency tree is meant to stock, please, talk! Completing this section and claiming the watermelon. Well, the watermelon, fuck. Claiming the watermelon, no. Why did I even say watermelon? There's no watermelon here. Watermelon, fuck. You'll basically make your way to the top of the volcano, and slowly work downwards as you clear each left and right loom. Left and right loom? I'm not sewing! Oh. It's certainly a sad backstory and closely mirrors the beginning of Aru's life with... Ori? It's not Oru in the Blind Forest. Oh my god.